The massive intergalactic conference hall hummed with an energy that felt both electric and alien. J. Park stood among hundreds of delegates, his heart racing despite his calm exterior. Around him, beings from 1,000 different worlds moved and conversed, their forms ranging from crystalline structures to floating gas clouds, from reptilian humanoids to entities that seemed to shimmer between solid and liquid states. At 28, Jay was the youngest human diplomat ever invited to this prestigious gathering. Most of his colleagues looked nervous, their bodies tense and movements calculated. But Jay was different. He watched, observed, and listened with a quiet intensity that set him apart from the typical human representatives. The Luminary delegation caught everyone's attention. They were impossibly beautiful creatures, their bodies seemingly made of living light. Their skin shifted between translucent blues and soft silvers, with internal patterns that seemed to pulse with an inner energy. Each movement they made was graceful, almost like a dance, calculated yet fluid. Jay had spent years studying alien cultures, but the Luminary remained a mystery. They were known for their advanced technology, their complex social structures, and their near-total disinterest in most other species. Humans, in particular, were considered primitive and uninteresting by their standards. The main conference chamber was a marvel of engineering. Floating platforms suspended in a massive spherical room, gravitational fields carefully balanced to allow representatives from different planetary environments to coexist comfortably. Holographic displays flickered with real-time translations, cultural context notes, and diplomatic information. When the Luminary lead diplomat entered, the entire room seemed to pause. Arya Kwan moved with a presence that demanded attention. She was tall, even by Luminary standards, her body radiating an intelligence that was almost physically palpable. Her eyes, if they could be called eyes, were complex geometric patterns that seemed to see beyond the physical realm. Most human delegates looked down or away. They feared making a mistake, worried about breaking some unknown protocol. But not Jay. He watched Arya with a mix of curiosity and respect, his posture relaxed but alert. The conference was discussing complex interstellar trade agreements, resource sharing, and potential conflict zones. Complicated topics that usually put most listeners to sleep. But Jay found it fascinating. He understood something most humans didn't. Communication was more than just words. It was about understanding, about finding common ground. Around him, other human diplomats whispered nervously. They discussed strategies, worried about potential misunderstandings, and constantly checked their translation devices. Jay remained calm. He had prepared differently. While others memorized scripts and protocols, he had studied the subtle nuances of Luminary communication. The room's temperature fluctuated subtly, a design feature to accommodate different species' comfort levels. Holographic displays shifted colors and patterns, providing context and background information for each speaker. Jay noticed how the Luminary delegates used these displays differently from other species, their interactions more intuitive and complex. Arya Kwan's team consisted of 5 other diplomats, each representing a different region of their vast interstellar civilization. They moved as a single unit, their communication so seamless it almost seemed telepathic. Their clothing, or what passed for clothing among their species, was a complex network of energy fields that changed color and pattern based on emotional and diplomatic contexts. Jay realized something most humans missed. The Luminary weren't just communicating through speech. Their entire being was a form of communication. The way they moved, the subtle shifts in their energy patterns, the complex geometric designs that constantly shifted on their skin, all of these were part of a language far more sophisticated than mere words. As the first session progressed, Jay kept his observations to himself. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply learning, understanding, absorbing the complex dynamics of interstellar diplomacy. His calm demeanor and focused attention made him stand out, though most in the room didn't realize it yet. The conference was just beginning, but Jay knew something significant was about to happen. He could feel it in the way the energy of the room shifted, in the subtle interactions between different species, in the complex dance of diplomacy that was about to unfold. Little did anyone know that Jay Park was about to change everything they understood about human potential and interstellar relations. The days following the first conference session were tense. Jay continued to observe the Luminari delegation, particularly Arya Kwan. While other human diplomats avoided direct interaction, he studied their communication patterns with intense focus. Luminari social protocols were complex beyond human understanding. Every gesture, every subtle energy shift carried meaning. Most species found these protocols intimidating. Humans were especially cautious, always afraid of making a terrible mistake that could damage diplomatic relations. But Jay was different. He had spent years preparing for this moment. His research went far beyond standard diplomatic training. He understood that communication wasn't just about words or formal agreements. It was about connection, about finding common ground in unexpected places. During breaks between conference sessions, Jay would sit quietly, reviewing data on Luminari culture. He noticed something most missed: a sense of loneliness within their diplomatic team. Despite their incredible technology and advanced civilization, there was a fundamental isolation in how they interacted with other species. The other human diplomats thought he was crazy. They warned him constantly. "Don't draw attention," they would say. "The Luminari don't like direct communication." But Jay saw an opportunity where others saw only risk. He began preparing something unprecedented. While other diplomats memorized scripted responses, Jay studied the deeper layers of Luminari communication. He learned about their historical challenges, their cultural nuances, the subtle ways they expressed emotions that were completely alien to human perception. The research center where he had prepared for this mission was filled with holographic displays and complex translation algorithms. Most of his colleagues focused on technological solutions. Jay focused on understanding, true, deep understanding that went beyond surface-level communication. His approach was different. He didn't want to impress the Luminari. He wanted to connect with them. This subtle difference would become his greatest strength. The diplomatic compound was a marvel of engineering. Multiple environmental zones allowed different species to coexist comfortably. Gravity fields, temperature controls, and atmospheric composition changed constantly to accommodate various delegates. Most found it overwhelming. Jay found it fascinating. He noticed how the Luminari moved differently in this space. Their energy patterns shifted more frequently, revealing subtle emotional states that most species missed entirely. Where others saw complicated protocols, Jay saw an opportunity for genuine communication. The other human diplomats watched him with a mixture of confusion and concern. Some thought he was too young, too inexperienced. Others saw something special in his approach, a kind of calm determination that set him apart from typical diplomatic representatives. Arya Kwan began to notice Jay, though she didn't show it openly. The way he observed, the careful attention he paid to details that other delegates completely missed, these were not typical human behaviors. She found herself curious, a dangerous emotion for a top-level Luminari diplomat. Jay's preparation went beyond standard diplomatic training. He had studied Luminari history, their technological achievements, their philosophical concepts, but more importantly, he had studied their emotional landscape, something most humans considered impossible. The compound buzzed with tension. Multiple species from across the galaxy watched each other carefully. Political alliances shifted like complex mathematical equations. Resources, technological exchanges, potential conflict zones, everything was negotiable. But Jay saw something deeper. He understood that true diplomacy wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding a way to understand each other. This perspective was rare among humans, almost unheard of in interstellar negotiations. As the next conference session approached, Jay knew he was preparing to do something no human had ever attempted. He wasn't just preparing a diplomatic strategy. He was preparing to challenge everything the galaxy understood about human potential. The other delegates would soon learn that Jay Park was not a typical human diplomat. He was something else entirely, a bridge between species, a potential key to understanding that went far beyond traditional diplomatic approaches. Something big was about to happen, and no one was prepared for it. The conference hall buzzed with nervous energy. Delegates from 100 different worlds sat carefully, watching every movement. Jay Park sat quietly, his hands folded, eyes focused on the Luminari delegation. Arya Kwan stood at the central platform, her body shifting with complex energy patterns. She was discussing complex resource allocation agreements between different galactic regions. Most delegates struggled to follow her intricate presentation. Jay had prepared carefully. He understood something most humans missed. Communication was more than just words. It was about timing, context, and genuine connection. When Arya finished her presentation, a silence filled the room. Typically, delegates would offer standard, diplomatic responses. Polite, careful, boring. But Jay was different. He stood up slowly, carefully. His movement caught the attention of several delegates. The human diplomats looked shocked. The Luminari team watched with cold, calculating eyes. Honored diplomat Arya Kwan, Jay spoke in perfect Luminari dialect. I noticed an interesting historical reference in your resource allocation strategy. The room went completely silent. No human had ever directly addressed a Luminari diplomat. During an official session, it was considered extremely inappropriate, almost insulting. Arya's energy patterns flickered, the Luminari equivalent of surprise. Her geometric eye structures focused directly on Jay. Most species would have wilted under such intense attention. Jay remained calm. He continued, referencing a complex historical event from the Luminari's third colonial expansion, something most current diplomats had forgotten. The reference was deep, showing extensive research and understanding. The other Luminari delegates looked confused. Their lead diplomat was being challenged, yet the challenge felt more like a respectful observation than an attack. Jay's voice was steady. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply sharing knowledge, showing genuine interest in their culture. This was different from typical diplomatic interactions. Some human delegates looked like they might faint. Breaking protocol was a serious diplomatic mistake. But Jay knew exactly what he was doing. Arya's energy patterns began to shift. Something was happening that had never happened before in galactic diplomatic history. A human was not just speaking to a Luminari diplomat. He was engaging with her on a level of cultural understanding few believed possible. You understand our historical context? Arya responded, her translation device carrying a hint of genuine curiosity. Most species consider our early colonial records too complex to study. Jay smiled. A simple, genuine smile that carried more meaning than elaborate diplomatic speeches. Understanding requires genuine interest, he responded. Not just reading, but truly comprehending the emotional and cultural context. The other Luminari delegates looked shocked. Their lead diplomat was having an actual conversation with a human, something completely unprecedented in their diplomatic history. Around the conference hall, representatives from other species watched with intense interest. Something unusual was happening. The typical rigid diplomatic dance was being rewritten in real time. Jay's approach was revolutionary. He wasn't trying to negotiate or win. He was trying to connect, to understand, to bridge a gap that had existed for generations. The human diplomatic team looked terrified. Breaking protocol could mean losing years of potential negotiations. But Jay understood something they didn't. True communication happened beyond rules and formal structures. Arya's energy patterns continued to shift. She was processing something unexpected, a human who genuinely understood her culture's deep historical nuances. Not just surface-level information, but true, complex understanding. You are different, she finally said. The words carried more weight than a typical diplomatic statement. Jay simply nodded. No grand speech, no dramatic declaration, just a simple, genuine acknowledgement. In that moment, everything changed. The entire hall could feel it. Something fundamental was shifting in galactic diplomatic relations. And it all started with one human's unexpected courage. News traveled fast in the galactic diplomatic circles. Within hours, Every species knew about the unusual interaction between J. Park and Arya Kwan. Whispers became discussions. Discussions became debates, and debates started to change how everyone viewed human potential. The Luminari High Council was not pleased. They held an emergency meeting in their crystal chambers, floating energy patterns showing their deep concern. A human had done something unprecedented, breaking every known diplomatic protocol while somehow maintaining perfect respect. Communication networks across different star systems buzzed with the story. How could a single human diplomat challenge centuries of established interaction rules? Most species had always considered humans as young, unprepared, and somewhat primitive. This incident was changing everything. Jay's diplomatic team was split. Some wanted to distance themselves from his actions, worried about potential consequences. Others saw something revolutionary happening. They realized Jay had done what no diplomatic training could teach. He had created genuine connection. The Human Research Center started analyzing the interaction. Communication experts, cultural anthropologists, and diplomatic strategists all studied the recordings. They discovered something remarkable. Jay had not just spoken to a Luminari diplomat. He had demonstrated a level of cultural understanding that was deeply rare. Alien species began requesting information about this unusual human. His background was thoroughly investigated. They discovered a young diplomat who had spent years studying not just languages, but the deep cultural contexts of different civilizations. Arya Kwan's team was equally confused. Their lead diplomat was showing signs of genuine interest in further communication with a human, something completely unexpected. Their internal communication networks were filled with discussions about this unusual development. The Luminari communication protocols were complex. They had specific rules about interaction, rules that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Jay had somehow navigated these rules perfectly, showing respect while simultaneously challenging their entire diplomatic approach. Political leaders from different star systems started requesting more information. If one human could do this, what did it mean for future diplomatic relations? The incident suggested that humans were far more adaptable and intelligent than previous interactions had shown. Research centers began reviewing their understanding of human potential. The typical view of humans as a young, somewhat aggressive species was being challenged. Jay had shown that humans could be patient, deeply intelligent, and capable of profound cultural understanding. The diplomatic compound became a center of intense speculation. Every species wanted to understand how this had happened. How could a single human create such a significant disruption in established diplomatic interactions? Jay remained calm through all of this. He continued his diplomatic duties, showing no special interest in the growing discussions about his interaction with Arya. This made people even more curious about him. Other human diplomats started studying his approach. They realized that true diplomacy was not about following strict rules, but about genuine understanding. Jay had shown that connection was more important than protocol. The Luminari High Council requested a detailed report about the interaction. They wanted to understand how their most sophisticated diplomatic protocols had been so elegantly navigated by a representative from a species they had previously considered unimportant. Communication networks started sharing the recording of the interaction. Experts from different species analyzed every moment, every word, every subtle energy shift. They discovered layers of communication that went beyond traditional diplomatic understanding. Some conservative diplomatic circles criticized the interaction. They argued that breaking established protocols was dangerous. But a growing number of representatives saw something different, a new approach to interstellar communication. Arya Kwan's continued interest in further communication with Jay was itself revolutionary. Luminari diplomats did not typically show personal interest in representatives from other species. This suggested something significant was happening. The incident became more than just a diplomatic moment. It was becoming a potential turning point in how different species understood each other. One human's courage and understanding were changing galactic perspectives. As discussions continued, one thing became clear. Something fundamental was shifting in interstellar relations, and it all started with a simple, genuine approach by a young human diplomat who dared to be different. The cultural disruption had begun, and no one knew exactly where it would lead. The final diplomatic session arrived with unprecedented tension. Delegates from across the galaxy watched carefully, knowing something significant was about to happen. Arya Kwan made an announcement that shocked everyone. She requested a personal cultural exchange with Jay Park, something completely unheard of in galactic diplomatic history. The Luminari had never shown such direct interest in any human before. The human diplomatic team was stunned. Some thought it was a trap. Others saw it as an incredible opportunity. Jay remained calm, his years of preparation showing in every careful movement. The exchange would involve deep cultural sharing, not just information exchange, but a genuine attempt to understand each other's species at the most fundamental level. The Luminari High Council had never approved such a direct interaction before. Jay's research became the foundation of this unprecedented diplomatic moment. He had spent years studying not just Luminari language but their entire cultural ecosystem. Most humans would have found the complexity overwhelming. For Jay, it was a fascinating puzzle. The first session was carefully monitored. Representatives from multiple species watched every moment, expecting some kind of diplomatic incident. But what happened was something entirely different. Arya shared complex Luminari historical narratives that had never been revealed to any other species. Jay listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed deep understanding. His approach was not about gathering intelligence, but about true connection. The Luminari communication networks began to change. Discussions about humans shifted from dismissive to curious. They started seeing humans not as a primitive species, but as potential partners in galactic understanding. Other alien species watched in amazement. The typical diplomatic interactions, formal, distant, carefully controlled, were being completely rewritten. Jay and Arya were creating something new, something that went beyond traditional communication. Research centers across different star systems began studying the interaction. They discovered layers of communication that went far beyond words. It was about understanding, about finding common ground in unexpected places. The human diplomatic approach was being transformed. No longer would humans be seen as just another young species trying to prove themselves. They were becoming something more, a species capable of deep, genuine connection. Arya's team reported something unusual. Their lead diplomat was showing emotional responses that were completely unexpected. The Luminari were known for their controlled, almost mathematical communication. But something was changing. Political leaders from different star systems began requesting more information. If humans could create this level of connection, what did it mean for future galactic relations? The potential was enormous. Jay understood something fundamental that most diplomats missed. Communication was not about winning or losing. It was about understanding, about finding the human, or alien, behind the diplomatic position. The cultural exchange continued for weeks. Each session revealed more about both species. The Luminari discovered the depth of human curiosity. Jay showed that human potential went far beyond their technological limitations. Communication networks buzzed with excitement. This was more than a diplomatic breakthrough. It was a potential revolution in how different species could understand each other. The Luminari High Council began discussing fundamental changes to their diplomatic protocols. The interaction between Jay and Arya had shown them something they had never considered possible: true connection across species boundaries. Other human diplomats started studying Jay's approach. They realized that genuine understanding required more than just information. It required patience, respect, and a willingness to see beyond surface-level differences. As the exchange continued, something remarkable happened. The rigid boundaries between species began to soften. What had started as a diplomatic interaction was becoming something much more profound. The galaxy watched and waited. One human's courage had opened a door that had seemed impossible. The revolutionary connection was just beginning. No one knew exactly where this would lead, but everyone understood that everything had changed. And it all started with a simple, genuine approach by a young human who dared to be different.